Thank you for joining us today. I'm Stephanie Hare, Senior Western Europe Analyst here at Oxford Analytica, and I'm in conversation with Dr. David Hein here of the University of Oxford about Italy and the Euro crisis. David, thanks so much for joining us today. I wanted to have you in so that we could discuss some of the developments that are happening in Italy, the third largest economy in the Euro area. We've been seeing a lot of focus and market anxiety about whether Spain will need a bailout. Now, we know their banking sector is already getting rescued. The fact of all this uncertainty and whether there are questions about a larger bailout for Spain is having the effect of pushing up borrowing costs for Italy, leading to concerns that the country that is too big to rescue will need just that. So can you tell us a bit about what's going on? Should we be worried?
Should we be worried? Certainly we should be worried. Any country which has a stock of debt over 120% of GDP within the euro is a source of concern. It's the stock of debt which is the real concern. I think markets are reasonably aware that the immediate fiscal position in Italy is actually quite decent. The primary deficit is not what's worrying markets. It's servicing that debt in the face of rising interest rates. The spread is not quite as bad as that of Spain. At one point last year, just before Christmas, it was actually higher than Spain, but by and large it's slightly lower, which probably reflects the belief that if anybody's to go after Greece, it'll be Spain, not Italy. But of course, markets will then move on. And there's a lot to worry about in Italy. There's the short-term problem that markets may probe once others have required a bailout, and the next market to probe would certainly be Italy after Spain. But secondly, and much more seriously, there is servicing that stock of debt with an economy that is simply not growing. Indeed, at the moment it's declining, as several others are in Europe. And with an economy in a political context where the necessary reforms are simply not forthcoming. So that's a big worry. Yeah, we should be worried.
Now, one of the things that we've seen driving up the borrowing costs for Spain has been this announcement that several of its regions need a bailout from the Spanish government. This has coincided with reports that several Italian regions are also in distress and may need to be put under some sort of fiscal disciplinary program and rescue from the Italian government. Yeah. Are we going to start seeing parallels there as well in terms of this regional debt question?
Yeah, well, we're seeing parallels, but the seriousness of the problem in Italy is nothing like that in Spain. The Sicilian region, for reasons connected with its administrative capacity, with its fiscal take, which is certainly grossly inadequate to what it spends, for reasons connected with corruption, with a poorly managed health service. Health is paid for at the regional level by and large in Italy. Sicilian region is close to needing some kind of bailout, and Monti is certainly imposing effectively an austerity package on Sicily. The cost of health over the next 2 to 3 years is going to be a serious problem for the regional finances. And I think that will knock on into political problems because Italians are very attached to the National Health Service and they do not want to see the size of the cuts that are coming. The 20 Italian regional governors are, to a man and a woman, compact against the next package of cuts that Monti is trying to impose. And they will try to offload the blame for a declining quality of health service onto central government. Now, that may not be so much a problem for Monti, but it'll certainly be a problem for whoever succeeds him next spring.
Well, that's the last point I'd like to return to with Italy, is that we know that Prime Minister Mario Monti is a technocratic prime minister. Italy is due to hold elections next year. There's already talks, though, that this could be brought up to sometime this year, as well as mention of a return of a character from Italy's past who may or may not come to rescue Italy. We're all talking about Silvio Berlusconi here. What are your thoughts on this, the political risk question of Italy?
Well, my thoughts are complex because the issue is enormously complicated. There is some merit in having an election this autumn. Uncertainty about the future clearly disturbs markets. If you can bring that uncertainty to some sort of conclusion, it may be better to draw it to a conclusion this autumn than next spring. If the conditions are right and you had a reasonable expectation that a government capable of taking the tough decisions that will continue to need to be taken will be in place. The problem is that under the current electoral system, there's a very high probability and near certainty that you won't get that sort of government. So you need electoral reform. Nobody knows what's being negotiated at the moment. Clearly a lot of negotiations going on. But the likelihood of getting a rational package, certainly for the autumn, doesn't look very high. So if we got to an autumn election, it would be because Monti's government collapsed, not because they were rationally bringing forward the election to overcome the uncertainty. And that would be bad news rather than good news. Right. If you're talking about what happens next spring, if we get there and then there's an election, will we get a government that is more capable than this one of taking tough decisions? Because Monti has taken some, but not nearly enough. I think the answer is right now I wouldn't put much money on it. Right now, if the left wins, and it looks more likely that the centre-left will win than the centre-right, you're going to have a very composite, complex coalition of the old Democratic Party, which is the old Social Democratic / Communist Party, but lots of other bits and pieces. And those other bits and pieces will be very unruly. It won't be an easy coalition to run, and cutbacks in social spending and reforms of the labour market are not going to be easy under those circumstances. Given that that's the real long-term problem for Italy alongside its debt problem, to get the reforms in place to increase competitiveness, to get back to growth, to enable Italy's relationship with the rest of the European Union to be more balanced, you need a government to do that. Are we going to get that? We certainly didn't have it with Silvio Berlusconi last time around. Personally, I still don't think he'll run. I think he's playing certain political games at the moment. But if he did run, I think it's highly unlikely, given the even more composite nature of his coalition, that we'd be any better off. Which leaves the final intriguing question: might we get to next spring's election in circumstances not dissimilar to those right now, in which case might there at the last moment be the possibility of Mr. Monti being, as it were, given an extended term? And would that be a good thing? Big question. And
with some very interesting implications for this question of democratic legitimacy in Europe.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we will conclude. For those of you who are interested in keeping up with our Italy coverage and understanding political risk in Europe and following the risk of European disintegration, please visit our website where you can see our Global Risk Monitor tool and read the daily brief. We look forward to seeing you next week.